name is Beth Hirschfeld, and I'm the president of the Canada-UAE Business Council. It is an absolute pleasure to have you join us for this very special webinar,
Thank you.
Global Markets, Oil and Opportunities in a New Post-COVID Era. Thank you all for joining us. As you know, we are fortunate to have an incredible panel of speakers to discuss this important issue. And as all the speakers have kindly agreed to keep their answers focused and succinct so that we can cover a wide range of topics, I will also keep this introduction short. We have a number of special guests on this webinar, many of whom will be making appearances during this session, so I will hold off on my formal introductions of them for now. That said, I would like to say a few thank yous before we get started on this webinar, as it would not have been possible without the help of so many. A sincere thank you to our engaged and supportive partners, the Canada Arab Business Council, the Canadian Business Council Dubai, and the Canadian Business Council Abu Dhabi, the Embassy of Canada to the UAE Embassy to Canada, the Consulate General of Canada in Dubai, and the Consulate of UAE in Toronto, a number of Canadian and UAE Chambers of Commerce, and of course to the teams of the expert speakers and the Mubadala team. Your hard work and support in putting together today's session has resulted in a fantastic turnout of 400 registrants, and what we hope will be an engaging and informative session that helps people understand more about the events of the past few months and what it may mean for businesses and the economy. Education through tools like this webinar is an important pillar in the work of the Canada-UAE Business Council, fondly known as the CUBC. The CUBC was spearheaded by the federal governments of the UAE and Canada to facilitate trade and business activity between the two countries. And the relationship has really blossomed in recent years, with 40,000 Canadians living in the UAE investing billions in Canada, and the UAE being Canada's second largest export partner in the Middle East and North Africa. And in a timely development, the trade relationship between the two countries went to a whole new level this past week, with Canadian companies comprising a key part of a 6-company consortium that made the single largest energy infrastructure investment into the UAE. And we'll dive into that more later. So let's get started. In the wake of a global pandemic and recent volatility in oil prices, we have witnessed unprecedented changes to global oil markets, which has prompted an urgent response from governments and corporations to navigate this unexpected shift. It is my honor to introduce our 3 expert speakers who will help shed some light on these developments. First, about what influenced these fluctuations and their associated impacts, and then examine the emerging business opportunities and the goal of diversification. There are a lot of topics we want to cover in today's session, so the format will be more conversational and interactive. If anyone attending has a question, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit a question. These impressive speakers need very little introduction, so I will keep them brief. First, we have His Excellency Mohammed Barkindo, who began his tenure as Secretary General of OPEC in 2016 and was reappointed as Secretary General for a further 3 years in 2019. First appointed to Nigeria's delegation in 1986, His Excellency is the longest serving member of OPEC. His Excellency Suhail Al-Mazrui was appointed as the UAE Minister of Energy in 2013, and in 2017 as the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure. He also serves on a number of boards, including as the Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Federal Electricity and Water Authority and of Borealis, and as a member of the board and vice chairman of the Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation, to name just a few. The Honorable Jason Kenney was elected Premier of Alberta in 2019 after serving as Minister of Multiculturalism for 8 years and later as the Minister of Employment and Social Development with the Canadian government. As the Premier of Alberta, one of Canada's richest oil provinces, he has led the province through this challenging time in the oil markets. So let's dive into the topics. First, we'll start with a question for all of the speakers. We have seen a lot of volatility in oil prices in recent months. Your Excellencies and Premier Kenny, in your view, what has been the most unexpected and impactful shift in oil markets in the past few months? And how has OPEC and your governments responded to these impacts? If we can, let's start with His Excellency Barkindo, who can give us a bit of a global perspective, and then from His Excellency Mazrui and the Honorable Jason Kenny on their perspective from their respective companies. Over to you, His Excellency Barkindo.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon from Vienna, and thank you very much for inviting me to join these esteemed speakers that, as you rightly said, need no introduction. One is a colleague in OPEC from a very key member of our organization, the United Arab Emirates, that we remain proud of as a member, Mohammed Suhail Al-Mazrui, as well as the eminent and respected Premier of Alberta, Honorable Kenny. So this is a great honor, not only for me personally, but for OPEC. You had asked a very important question to set the tone of the discussions this afternoon. And I want to answer by stepping back to the World Economic Forum in January, just this January, in Davos, in Switzerland, when the world leaders gathered and passed a vote of confidence on the global economy, projecting a very robust growth for 2020. I remember a session where the IMF, the World Bank, Steve Mnuchin of the United States, the president of the European Bank, all passed not only a vote of confidence, but also said the global economy was in a better shape than it was when they met during the fall at the World Bank IMF fall meetings, and how times have changed between then and now. We saw the entire global economy almost grinding to a halt when more than half of the global population went into one form of restriction or another. And it goes without saying, you don't need any model to tell you that demand for energy in general and demand for oil in particular would plummet. And indeed it did, to unprecedented levels. At one point, we were talking of nearly 30 million barrels of oil demand destruction, as others call it. We are not out of the woods, but these were unprecedented times. I cannot say anyone was prepared for that. But for us in OPEC, together with our partners in the OPEC and non-OPEC Declaration of Cooperation, we had a tested mechanism in the framework of the Declaration of Cooperation that brought together OPEC and non-OPEC countries for the first time to work together in the last 4 years. So we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. We relied on this mechanism and went back to work and did our best to come up with this historic decision in April, 2 meetings between the 9th and the 12th of April to withdraw 9.7 million barrels a day from the market. But we were still facing an unprecedented demand slowdown, others say destruction, of nearly 30 million. But it was a very good start. It was a very strong signal to the market. It had never happened in history of oil. And we saw for the first time the biggest producers in the world came around to assist us to take this decision. We're grateful for the support we got from Canada. We have been in constant dialogue with Honorable Sonia Savage from Alberta, and we saw the United States and other producers all coming around because of the sheer magnitude of the destruction that we are facing, this meltdown that we had never seen. It's totally new. On the 20th of April, we were sitting in this same very room with my colleagues in research, trying to comprehend what was unfolding before our own eyes until we saw the price of West Texas Intermediate going below sub-zero in New York. And we decided to adjourn our meeting here on that day that is now called Bloody Monday. So all being said, although we are not yet out of the woods, but we have proven together with our partners in the non-OPEC, with the support of countries like Canada, that multilateralism is irreplaceable, especially in our diverse world of energy that is sometimes punctuated with geopolitics. When we came together, when Canada took the floor at the G20 on the 10th of April and made such a positive statement to the members of the G20, who account for nearly 80% of the global GDP, it was uncountable. We could not quantify the value of that statement that came from Canada, that helped us to mobilize other producers from Brazil, from Colombia, from Norway, and others, that we are all in the same boat. We are all talking about one global industry, one commodity, oil, that is not only for us, but is also for consumers, and that we have a responsibility as producers, whether we are in Alberta, or we are in the Emirates, or we are in Arabia, to make sure that this commodity is available to consumers around the world, not only today, but tomorrow, the day after, for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. If I could pass the floor now to His Excellency Al-Masri.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to join both Honorable Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, and my good friend Mohammed Barkindo. To build on what His Excellency Mohammed Barkindo said, this has been a shock. Not only a shock to a country or a region or a continent, this was the single largest shock to the whole world economy at once. And it was a double whammy since we got also the demand shock of a major commodity, which is the crude oil. So, as you know, controlling the production or trying to alter the production was an unknown practice, because trying to control the production while you are faced with almost what happened to be a 30% reduction in the world demand, and at a certain point was an unprecedented action. So we were walking in a new land where we didn't know what would be enough, and to gather all of those countries, which was the OPEC plus, and managed to get them agree quickly to a 9.7 or what was a 10 million cut, was also something that never happened in the history of cooperation of oil producers in the world. Countries sacrificing 23% of their production, while others are just watching, was not easy. But we managed to do it because we got good friends like our Canadian, and I would like to salute the Alberta for joining us. As Mohammed said, they were brave to come and say, we will do our share, because solidarity was needed and we had to do it together. So I think what happened showed that we can always, at a difficult time, work together and manage this storm. No one was predicted, though, even after we announced the cut, that the market or the market will quickly rebound to where we are today. So this also something that was not expected. Even when we announced the 9.7, some analysts said it may not be enough and all of that. And we were sure that if we do it and if we stick to it and countries implement the cut, we can bring order into this field. Our worry is not a price as a producers. Our worry was saving the whole industry, saving millions of jobs, saving investors or convincing investors to come back and invest in this commodity after COVID-19. So those are the areas that we were keen on, because if we don't do that, then we will have another shock a few years from now, and that is something that we don't want to experience. So tough time. We're still in the woods, but I think I am confident, and I said this, that this group will continue doing, and this group will continue to work with good friends like our friends in Canada and Alberta to do what is good for the market. We all keen as producers to produce our barrels, to contribute to our economy, but we need to do it at the right pace and at the right time. So UAE was very pleased to support the deal and also do the extraordinary voluntary cut in June that we did together with Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. So we did even beyond the cut of the other countries, just to support these efforts and to bring stability, hopefully, to the market.
Thank you, Your Excellency. If I could now pass the floor to the Honorable Jason Kenney.
Thanks very much, Beth. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Minister Mazzouri, good to see you again. We sat next to each other in Montreal last summer, and Secretary General Burkindo, thank you very much for having included Alberta in some of your recent conversations. I know that Minister Savage has enjoyed working with you collaboratively over the past few very challenging months. I should say off the top, as this is the first time I've had a chance to speak to the UAE Business Council, that my parents lived in Dubai for 8 years. My father ran a college there in Dubai, and so I've been many times and look forward to getting back in my capacity as the Premier of Alberta. For those who don't know, Alberta has the world's third largest proven and probable oil reserves, and we are the fifth largest producer in the world. We typically, before this crisis, would produce about 4 million barrels per day. So outside of Russia and OPEC, that makes us by far the largest producer in the world. But yet we've typically been outside of international discussions about supply with entirely private sector producers developing an asset that belongs to the state. And one other factor that's important to understand is that our basin is largely landlocked. We have very limited access to coastal markets. And so we're almost entirely beholden to the United States as our sole export market for Alberta crude, which is, by the way, about 85% of Canadian crude production. And this means that we have a significant price differential between our own domestic benchmark price, known as Western Canada Select, which is a heavy crude blend, and WTI, which is the global benchmark that we use. Typically, that differential runs around 35%. But in recent years, it really started to get out of control. About 18 months ago, we reached a price differential of 85-90% between WCS and WTI, meaning that we were giving away our oil at pennies on the dollar to American refineries, and that was intolerable. So for that reason, the government of Alberta used its power to bring in a form of curtailment, a form of production cap back at the beginning of 2019, we shut in through state mandate about 400,000 barrels a day, so about 10% of our production, and that corrected the price for us immediately. WCS effectively went at that point from $8 a barrel to about $40 a barrel. So this dynamic of being landlocked and the price differential we have in the United States made us particularly vulnerable when the coronavirus demand impact hit back in March. I once again, I do appreciate Secretary General Burkindo's reach out to my Minister of Energy, or the very capable, the Honorable Sonia Savage. And we were able to, I think, open lines of communication, as we did with our friends to the south of here. Of course, much more complicated in the American oil market because they're much less centralized than we are. And like Canada, the regulation of oil production is a state and not a national, not a federal level responsibility. But unlike Canada, their production is spread across many different states. I mean, I think Texas has 40%, whereas we have nearly 90% in Alberta. So Alberta has a much greater capacity to act in the Canadian context. And for whatever reason, the decision-making process around things like production curtailment is very complex in places like Texas. We kind of nudged the Texas Railroad Commission to consider following our lead on curtailment in the spring. But they just seemed, frankly, incapable of making those kinds of decisions. So I just want to add, though, that, and perhaps my colleagues could comment on this, we were, let me just say, distressed to see some producers deciding to actually seek to increase supply in the face of the demand destruction. And to this day, this seems to me to have been, quite frankly, an unnecessary and irresponsible act that worsened an already bad situation. And I hope that all major producers have learned the lesson from that, that destroying the value of the asset is to nobody's advantage. And I hope that we'll never go through that sort of a period again. Finally, before we take questions, I'll say that we are optimistic that even though the Alberta, the Canadian energy sector has been through an unprecedented crisis here, on top of 5 challenging years, because it's no secret that our industry is more expensive than many of the OPEC producers. We primarily, not exclusively, but primarily produce heavy oil through bitumen in northern Alberta through the oil sands, and the break-even cost on production is about $30 a barrel. The all-in break-even, including cost of capital, is closer to $40 a barrel. So much higher than many of the light sweet producers in the OPEC countries. And so right now we're kind of bumping along survival prices. We are optimistic that once post-COVID demand fully returns and global inventories start to come off, that there will be a strong future. And obviously a great deal of production has been shut in, some of it permanently, and there's going to be, I think we will see 12 to 18 months from now, a significant shortage of supply start to emanate from the lack of investment in exploration and production. Whereas in Canada, our basin is very capital efficient. Once you develop an oil sands project, it can produce for 30 years or so without significant additional injections of capital. So we do believe there will be a bright future for our sector here, as long as we get that coastal access and additional market access to which I referred. And in that respect, the Government of Canada is assisting the industry by helping to build a pipeline to Canada's west coast, and the Government of Alberta has made a historic investment in a major pipeline to the U.S. Gulf Coast refinery complex, the Keystone XL project. So those are important projects for the mid to long term to demonstrate to capital markets that increased investment in production will result in actual sales and actual shipment of our product. And with that, looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Premier Kenney. I really liked your use of the words optimism and brighter future, and I think that links very naturally into the next part of our discussion, which is really a forward-looking aspect to where do we go from here. So what I'd actually like to do, I'm going to switch the program up a little bit because of Premier Kenny, what you said, and I'd like to actually introduce a special guest to ask a question. So I'd like to introduce a special guest, Ambassador Marcy Grossman, to ask a question. Ambassador Grossman was appointed as the Ambassador to Canada to the United Arab Emirates in 2019, after serving as Canada's Consul General for Dubai and the Northern Emirates from 2018 to 2019. And she was notably responsible for the creation of Canada's foreign direct investment agency, Invest in Canada. Ambassador Grossman, I believe you have a question for His Excellency Al Mazrui.
Thank you, Beth. As a segue to my background in foreign direct investment, my question is for Your Excellency Al Mazrui, and it's on the topic of foreign direct investment. And just last week, the UAE welcomed the single largest investment in energy infrastructure in the region, with a consortium of investors acquiring a $10 billion stake in ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, in their gas pipelines. So mabruk to you. And Canada, too, was very proud that a significant portion of that investment came from our very own Brookfield Asset Management and the Ontario Teachers Plan. So with that, can you please tell us why this was an important deal for the UAE and how it fits into your future energy plans, as well as the Canada-UAE economic relationship? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And this is an excellent question. First of all, congratulations also to you. I think seeing this mega projects or mega investments from international investors, including the Brookfield Asset Management and Ontario Teachers Pension Fund, is a result of the good work that you and your team have put together in promoting the relationship. Why this project is large? This is probably since 2017. ADNOC started to have a new fresh look at our investments and infrastructure, upstream, downstream, trying to create value through partnership. And UAE, like many countries, believe in that partnership. And since we started exploring, we started with a partnership, and we are very proud that we expanded that partnership in the upstream. And now we have done something new, I think, which is unlocking values to bring high quality assets in the infrastructure projects in the oil and gas. Those are the assets that you typically an IOC would keep for themselves. I think ADNOC have done an exercise with the investors. There was a high appetite for that quality asset, and due to our excellent rating as well, and having one of the leading IOCs in terms of operating model, reducing the cost per barrels. We are probably, if not the lowest producer, one of the lowest producers in the world in producing for hydrocarbon, and also in our infrastructure projects. So this is quite transformational in the way that IOCs look at their assets. I don't think many IOCs have done such infrastructure projects in terms of offering to the shareholders, and we are very happy with the turnaround from the investors. We managed to at a very difficult time, as you could imagine. Financial institutions and pension funds are difficult to attract in this time, where people are looking at post-COVID was going to happen. But regardless of all of that, ADNOC have managed to bring together this large interest from the quality investors to offer them a very prime quality assets. And we hope that this is the beginning of this relationship, and we hope that we in the future are going to see those investors from Canada and from other countries come and explore other opportunities that ADNOC and the other companies could offer. So this is just the beginning, but I think it's quite transformational in how IOCs look at the partnerships, and we've been leading the way. And I think these investments have put another dimension to explore such investments.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you both so much. I'd now like to introduce our next special guest, His Excellency Fahad Al Rabbani, the UAE Ambassador to Canada. After an illustrious private sector career that included leadership positions with Mubadala Investment Company and the Abu Dhabi Council for Economic Development, His Excellency became the UAE Ambassador to Canada in 2018. I believe that His Excellency would like to ask a question to Premier Kenny.
Thank you, Beth. Honorable Jason Kenny, great to see you after having met last summer with Minister Al-Mazroui. Your Excellency Barkando, nice to meet you, although virtually. Honorable Kenny, Alberta having been blessed with one of the world's largest oil reserves, placing it amongst the top 5 globally speaking, and seeing sovereign wealth funds such as Norway encouraging companies to become more environmentally aware and friendly. I believe Canada has taken great strides in embracing that, as well as embracing the social and the governance part to become a world leader. What steps can Canada take further to develop this and differentiate itself from other countries?
Thank you, Ambassador. Good to see you again. I hope all is well with you. And I do look forward to my first official visit to the Emirates. Let me say that you're correct. Recently, the Norwegian Sovereign Fund indicated that they were withdrawing investments from the Alberta oil sands. And this is part of a broader trend that we have seen from some mainly European institutional investors to restrict access to capital for the Alberta oil sands. And we believe this is based on frankly, a highly politicized campaign that is misinformed about the nature of our oil production. It's true that the extraction of crude from bitumen from our oil sands is generally more, for example, carbon intensive than the extraction of light sweet crude in other basins. But it's also true that we have been making enormous progress in reducing the environmental footprint of our energy production. The carbon intensity of an average barrel of crude extracted from Canadian bitumen has gone down by about 30% since the year 2000. And we are credibly on track to see a further 20% reduction in that carbon intensity by the end of this decade. We have a lower carbon footprint per barrel than the average producer of heavy crude around the world. For example, much lower than California heavy crude. And there's a whole new series of technologies about to come on stream to really accelerate that. We're moving from, example, steam-assisted gravity drainage as the primary technology used in the so-called in situ oil sands projects. We're moving from that very energy-intensive steam approach to using solvents that will radically reduce our energy consumption in producing the oil, but also reduce water usage and improve air quality. We're moving to gas cogeneration for our power needs in the oil sands production region. And we're also world leaders in carbon capture and storage technology. We just opened, for example, something called the carbon trunk line that takes carbon extracted, captured at refineries in northern Alberta, and ultimately injects that into empty oil caverns subterranean in our sedimentary basin in central Alberta. I could go on, but we're making massive investments in that kind of environmental technology. And then, so we would say, if you actually look at the ESG, environmental social governance ranking of our major producers, companies like Suncor, Canadian Natural Resources Limited, Cenovus, Husky, and others, you will see that they rank at the very top amongst oil companies producing around the world. Obviously, we think that our social and governance standards in Canada are second to none. So this is, unfortunately, some environmental lobby groups in Europe have, I think, distorted these realities, and they have tended to classify Canadian bitumen as being the equivalent to thermal coal, which is completely unscientific. So actually later today, I'll be announcing that we're launching a new investment promotion agency in Alberta, in part to get our story out to those institutional investors about our real environmental, social, and governance performance.
Thank you so much for, oh, sorry, Your Excellency.
It's okay, but I just wanted to say thank you to the Honorable Jason Kenney.
And thank you for the heads up as well. We'll look forward to that announcement later today. I'd now like to call on the Honorable Jean Charest, who is our Canadian co-chair of the Canada-UAE Business Council, to ask a question. With a public service career spanning 30 years, the Honorable Jean Charest is one of Canada's best-known political figures, having served in such important roles as the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and the Premier of Quebec. He now serves as a partner at the law firm McCarthy Tétrault. Mr. Charest, I believe you have a question for His Excellency Barkindo.
Thank you very much, Beth, and I hope everyone can hear me. And Excellencies, it's a real honor for us at the Canada-UAE Business Council to be able to host you for this webinar. And we know your time is very precious. And so, and to my compatriot, Premier Kenney, thank you very much. We know this is a very busy day for you, and you've been able to make some time. And so the question I want to ask, as someone who was an observer of everything that unfolded around the crisis and the drop in demand and production, there was this very important episode about storage and the storage capacity in the world that had a very severe or very real impact on the price, on the ability of the industry to be able to manage its resource. So I guess, Excellency Barkindo, the question that a number of us who are not that familiar with the industry are asking themselves is, how is this going to be unwinded as production does ramp up? And I'm very optimistic also. I think we're coming out of this crisis and demand will obviously return to levels where we experienced it before, and there'll be growth. But how do you unwind the storage capacity on the one hand? What impact does it have on the price? And on the second part is for the future. Does there need to be more storage capacity developed? Does it have to be closer to the refineries? What is your perspective on this for the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. This is a very, very important question. Way back in February, March, in the run-up to the meltdown that we saw, which you made reference to, one of the major concerns of the industry was that as a result of this double shock of supply and demand, the industry was going to exhaust its storage capacity, both onshore and probably offshore. And because of the inverse relationship, quantitative speaking, between stocks and prices, whenever stocks and inventories build up, especially way above the industry's 5-year average, prices go down south. And when the meltdown started and we were boxed in from both sides of the equation, I recall that the major concern was that in the event that we allowed the storage capacity worldwide to exhaust, to reach tom tax, then we were heading to a total crash. The preliminary numbers that we saw here in the Secretariat that we reviewed with Minister Al-Mazroui and his other colleagues, if I recall, the projected buildup was in the region of 1.3 billion barrels above the 5-year industry average. Now, to put this into context, in the last down, 2014 to 2016, we saw stocks build above the 5-year average to an unprecedented level of 403 million barrels over the 5-year average. This is in the summer of 2016. And it took the 24 countries in the Declaration of Cooperation, both OPEC and non-OPEC, 4 years to be able to help the market, assist the market to drain down the stocks to 5-year average, when the IEA itself came out and said it was mission accomplished, if you remember. Now, without the historic decisions that Suhail Al-Mazrui and his colleagues took on the 9th and the 12th of April, the story would have been completely different today. Even the recovery that we are beginning to see would have been impossible. We could have seen worse than what we saw on Bloody Monday, on the 20th of April. What the historic decisions did was to arrest the buildup in stocks to 1.3 billion barrels above the 5-year average, 3 to 4 times what we saw in the summer of 2016 that took 4 years to bring down to a stable supply and demand balance. So to answer your question, storage is very, very important. It's part of the supply chain. And investments is the lifeblood of this industry, not only in the upstream, midstream, downstream, but also in storage. You have heard from Minister Al-Mazrui the difficulty they have been having accessing funds from pension funds, other equity funds, and so on, because of the near allergy that we are seeing from the investment community in energy, and due partly to the unprecedented level of volatility that we are seeing. We know that investors are normally allergic to uncertainty, to investment. So what we are trying to do is not only to restore the stability, but stability for what? Stability for both the consumers as well as the producers, that will provide us with the enabling environment to bring back investors, not in trickles, but in large numbers, to be able to take advantage of the huge investment opportunities in the industry, not only within OPEC member countries, but also in countries such as Canada, especially the province of Alberta.
Thank you very much, Excellency.
Thank you both for that discussion piece. Turning to economic diversification now, it is my pleasure to introduce our UAE CUBC co-chair, Mr. Musaba Al-Kabi, to discuss with the panelists the issue of economic diversification. Mr. Al-Kabi is the Chief Executive Officer, Petroleum and Petrochemicals, and a member of the Investment Committee for Mubadala Investment Company, and is responsible for a portfolio of international assets spanning the global oil and gas value chain and valued in excess of $40 billion. So he is clearly well-versed on today's topics, and I am pleased to turn the floor over to him to lead this part of the discussion.
Thank you, Beth. It is truly a pleasure and honor to host the 3 distinguished speakers. As a CUBC, we're very honored to have you, and the discussion is very relevant to what's happening currently in the market. When you look at the energy outlook for 2030, 2040, it's clear that the oil and gas will remain a key pillar in the future energy demand. However, we expect the journey to be, a bit bumpy, ups and downs, and more fluctuation in the oil prices, coupled with the political agenda like the climate change, the ESG consideration. So I'm interested to hear the views from His Excellency Suhail Al-Mazrui and Premier Kenny on what's their plans on the economic diversification. I know UAE started a long time ago, back in 2007, embracing Abu Dhabi diversification vision for 2030. I know that in Alberta, they have all what it takes to become a fully diversified and a knowledge-based economy. There are many sectors in the province that would thrive in the future. So it would be nice to hear from both speakers about their policies. So let me start with Premier Kenny. I know it's a relevant topic, and then we'll hear from His Excellency Sohail Mazroui as well.
Well, it's also a very timely topic because in about 2 hours, I'm going to be launching Alberta's economic recovery plan, which includes a huge, ambitious series of investments and policies to accelerate economic diversification. Beth, is this, do we have media on the line here, or is this a closed meeting? Can I ask?
I believe that there may be some, so anticipate that there could be.
Okay, then I won't reveal all the details yet. But let me just say that we will be accelerating a series of policies. For example, Alberta is determined to have the lowest corporate tax rates in North America to attract investment right across the board without being sector specific. And we'll be making an announcement about accelerating that today. We will be announcing the largest ever investments into infrastructure to get people back to work. Right now, we obviously have a jobs crisis here, an official unemployment rate of 15%, we think real effective unemployment rate of 25% if you measure that against historic levels of labor force participation. And that's, most of that is because of the recent the global coronavirus recession together with the collapse in energy prices. But part of it is based on 5 years of economic weakness here because of prices. So jobs are just critical for us, and we'll be making major investments that get people back to work right now. Also building infrastructure that will help us to be more productive and competitive in the long term, much of it in new industries to support the development of new industries. We'll be announcing a new tax credit to support the innovation and technology sectors, which are growing here in Alberta, but less quickly than in some other parts of Canada. Quebec has done a brilliant job of seeing a huge expansion in those knowledge sectors. We'll also be launching a series of sector strategies, to put an emphasis on new industries that we hope to build in this province, including aviation, financial technology, and many others that, like, for example, agriculture and tourism. Everybody knows the Rocky Mountains. The most magnificent pictures that you see, they're all taken from the Alberta side of the border, not British Columbia. We have one of the most amazing tourism offerings in the world. Obviously, the tourism sector right now is in great adversity. So we'll be launching a sectoral strategy to support rebuilding our tourism industry, value added in agriculture, as I say, finance and fintech, and much more. We actually have some of the world's cutting edge developments in areas like machine learning and artificial intelligence emanating from our large universities here that we hope to further accelerate. And so just, I guess, stay tuned, but it'll be a very broad announcement that I'm making in just a couple of hours.
His Excellency?
Yes, Msabbih, thank you very much for this question, and congratulations, your Honorable Kenny, on your announcement. It's unfortunate that we could not hear you because of the worrying that you will break the news before you have to do it.
I was on one of these calls. I was on one of these calls recently with the U.S. business group, and I revealed all sorts of things that had not been publicly released yet, and immediately it hit the news wires, and my staff became very cross with me, so I'm not repeating that mistake.
No, and we know it's going to be interesting, and I wish you good luck and all the best in your plans. Similar in the United Arab Emirates. I mean, as Msabbih, you mentioned, We started the diversification of our economy a long time ago, where we used to have primarily oil and gas as a major source of income, but I think we moved along very healthy to the level of 30% or so. And now, even within the energy, we are also diversifying. So we have a plan to diversify our energy sources to more greener forms of energy, up to 50% by the year 2050. And that alone is going to provide an investment to the investors, including the Canadian, of up to $160 billion over the next 30 years or so. So that's also providing, again, a partnership potential and a potential for doing projects together. In addition to that, in the industrial sector, which is also my ministry is trying to regulate and trying to promote, we are promoting the fourth industrial revolution technologies, including the machine learning, AI, robotics, digitization of our economy, and 3D printing. In terms of AI, we are very bullish in our plans, to the level that we established a dedicated, the world's first dedicated university only for AI, and that means that the government is keen on pursuing that avenue. We have very good news on the implementation, though. We started some of the applications of the AI in different sectors, and we have seen a remarkable results in reducing costs, increasing efficiency. Those are some of the areas. Tourism and spending on the infrastructure is also one way where we are promoting the diversification of our economy. We have a world-class ports and airports linking the east to the west, and we have benefited from that relationship, and we will continue doing so. But I think all of the countries post-COVID, they are revisiting their plans, looking at how we will benefit as well from the learnings of this pandemic that flipped the whole economy upside down and made us worried about things that we did not worry about before, such as food security and healthcare, internal healthcare security. Some of the things that we never worried about is being able to provide PPE equipments, for example. That was an issue for many countries. And we are very proud of some of our industrial sites or manufacturing facilities that they turned themselves. One of those is one of our companies in Mubadala called Strata. Within 30 days, from building a spare parts composites to the wings of the leading aircraft, they shifted to build an N95 PPE equipment and turn their facility to up to 30 million masks per year. And that was a very opportunistic, move from them, while the airline industry was suffering from issues and stopping the demand or interrupting the demand. They shifted to something else and they've been able to do it. So also adaptability is, I think, something that we learn, and I think we will capitalize on that in the future.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful.
Wonderful. Mr. Al-Kaabi, while we have you on the line, we're talking a lot about economic diversification, and obviously you work with a company that is very focused on this issue as well. I was wondering if you could speak for a minute or two on this issue from a business perspective as well.
Well, thank you. I think His Excellency Suhail Mazrouei covered the topic very well. However, as you mentioned, Mubadala Investment Company is a world-class investment, investment powerhouse. asset under management of $229 billion. We are a big investor in Canada and in Alberta as well. So we're very proud of our investment globally. However, we have a mandate also to help in the diversification efforts of the country. As I mentioned earlier, back in 2007, Abu Dhabi embraced a vision called Abu Dhabi 2030, anchoring around diversifying the local economy and depending less on the oil and gas sector. We're very proud as a company that we built and established new sectors here in the UAE, including information technology, including aerospace, business, and aluminum smelter as well. And currently, we're building an ecosystem in Abu Dhabi to attract technology startups. We call the place Hub 71. It is maybe a small version of the Silicon Valley, hopefully for the region. 2 hours, 3 hours away from the UAE, you can tap into big markets like India, the Middle East. So we're very optimistic that Abu Dhabi and UAE will provide the ecosystem for the region to flourish and to help the diversification process of the region. So we will continue that journey. It's going to be challenging, but it's a journey that we're very committed to.
Thank you so much for your insights. It is hard to believe, but the hour has already gone by, thanks to such engaging and insightful speakers. So unfortunately, we won't have time for any more questions, but we very, very much appreciate all of your insights and thoughts on these important topics. Clearly, what we've seen today is that we are living through unprecedented times, but with that change and with that shift really comes an opportunity. And I want to thank the speakers for helping shed some light on those opportunities today. To the speakers, to our special guests, and of course to all of you on the webinar today, a sincere thank you for joining us. It has been a true pleasure to connect with all of you. I'd now like to pass the floor to Mr. Al-Kabi for just a few final words before we sign off.
You mentioned it very clearly. Thanks to everyone. It's truly a pleasure to host you all. It's been very insightful. And on behalf of the business communities from both countries, we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you.